My name's Peter. For all of you who are new to the channel, I'm a professional voice actor. Stick around. There's lots of great stuff to come. So, without further ado, here is The Cost of Tranquility. Roll the tape! The Cost of Tranquility. Alex awoke from her slumber. It was one of those times where the body was already awoken, waiting for the mind to come to. In an instant, she was fully conscious. No drowsiness, no limp limbs. She was lying on her back, her hands folded behind her head, acting as a pillow. The morning air reached her nose, and she inhaled a lungful of it, but instantly felt compelled to reject it, for it was wrong. Everything was wrong, and yet it was right. A celestial peace had descended upon her and her abode. She slowly sat upright. The familiar sway of the trawler as the sea ran against it in currents was no longer. It was completely still. She gazed out the window. A thick fog had enveloped the boat. She couldn't even discern the water off the side of the ship, if indeed there was any. Entranced, she lethargically paced her way out onto the front deck. In fog this dense, telling the exact time of day was impossible, but she knew it was daytime at least. All of the nets had been left on the floor of the deck mid-haul, but they were laid with care, not thrown down in a struggle. And how odd that was. Where was Brian and Jason? Concern for these two was not at the forefront of Alex's mind, for just then she was incapable of caring. She stood there for a few minutes, although it felt like hours, staring into the nothingness before her eyes that was the impenetrable fog. Her mind absent of all thoughts. She was becoming absorbed in the peace around her, becoming ever more invested in it the longer she spent here. Peaceful as it was, Alex started to fill with a cold that gnawed its way from the outside to the inside, not unlike the brutal, all-consuming sub-zero winds of the Arctic she and her fellow fishermen had experienced all those years before. But this was not a wind. This was different. She traipsed around the boat to the back deck, where it felt slightly warmer, and sat on Jason's deck chair. Her eyes grew heavy under the invisible spell, and she drifted off. A joyous melody, so faint that it could be dismissed as mere imagination. A warmth so full that it had no logical place on the ocean. A soft caress along her cheekbone. A gentle sway from side to side. Gentle lifts from the ocean. Her eyes shot open. The smothering fog had cleared. Dusk was upon the horizon. A beautiful orange glow was settling across the sea. She let her eyes wander upon the sky, slowly trickling down the cascade of multifarious colors until they came to rest on a woman wading in the water, her arms thrown up onto the side of the boat. She had a thick mane of auburn hair, which almost seemed to glow. Her hazel eyes picked up the orange of the sun, appearing to burn with a fire so intense that it hypnotized Alex. Startled, she stumbled up, but her feet were entangled in the fishnets at her feet. Hopping about in a futile attempt to free herself and regain balance, she finally waned under the fatigue in her knees and collapsed to the deck next to this mysterious woman. Her head met the deck with a tremendous force, and her vision grew hazy. In a dreamlike state, she barely felt the woman catch a hold of her hands from her water-bound state and drag her closer to the bow until she was resting upon the railing. It was warmer near the water. The chorus was louder there too. The way she touched her was so benevolent. Alex looked up into the eyes of this woman who appeared to be upside down. The woman leaned closer. Alex felt the soft touch of her breath on her face. Although initially terrified, she no longer felt compelled to move. She wanted to be near this woman. Questions like, "Who are you?" and "Why are you here?" came to Alex's mind, but she knew she wouldn't get an answer. This woman seemed incapable of speaking. What was her name? Where did she come from? As these thoughts were running through Alex's mind, a smile spread along the woman's face. The distance between their faces was closing all the while she was having this inner monologue. No sooner had she registered the smile than they were kissing. The air was sucked out of Alex's lungs, drowning in this blazing kiss that never seemed to end. Her lips locked to the woman's. At the same time, Alex felt a warmth fill her body, evicting the cold emptiness she had endured for hours. At last, the woman pulled away, still smiling. "Come with me," commanded the woman. The words stunned Alex, and she mustered a hoarse and barely audible response. Alex attempted to rise, but her legs seemed to weigh tons. Instead, she slinked over the bow, coming to rest in the woman's arms, who supported her in the water until she realized she could wade on her own. The music had a greater presence here. It seemed to emanate from below. By now, the cold had completely evaporated. Even the water seemed warm. The woman's eyes appeared black and large now, as the sun had finally succumbed to the horizon. "Are you sure?" asked the woman. "Yes," Alex whispered. She embraced Alex in a clasp so tight yet soft, it was inescapable. "Look, your friends." She gestured with her eyes downward to the depths. Alex looked down. She could see 4 distinct orbs of light, like fireflies, glowing under the water. The longer she looked, the better she could discern the figures below her. There were 2 more women. Only, wait, they weren't women. They had tails instead of legs. They both glowed, as did their partners. 2 men? It was Brian and Jason. They looked so happy, swimming around the mermaids. They looked up from their depth and beamed when they saw Alex, making emphatic gestures with the arms. "They want to be with you," she said. Alex looked down at the woman holding her. She also had a tail. Alex nodded at the woman. She was ready. The woman's embrace further tightened. They were inseparable. Their descent began, and the water slowly rose around Alex's shoulders, creeping up her neck, her lips, her eyes. As they descended, Alex looked for Brian and Jason, but they were nowhere to be seen in the ever-darkening volume of water, nor the 2 mermaids they were playing with. The warmth began to fade, and fear crept into Alex's mind. She longed to be back on the boat. She didn't understand what was happening. Her eyes flicked up to the surface, where she saw two limp bodies floating near the starboard side of the trawler. Her eyes grew wide with horror. When her gaze returned to the woman holding her, everything looked different. The woman's smile had grown malicious, her teeth pointed, her hair alive and writhing. The heavenly melody morphed into a horrible cacophony of screeches and cries. Alex began wriggling desperately in a futile attempt to escape the woman's ironclad grasp. Suddenly, the other two mermaids were swimming around her, watching in delight as their maiden siren claimed another soul. Alex's eyes grew heavy, and she lost the energy to resist. This fight was over. She had lost.